Right, thank you for joining me, Chris. We're live.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
so, a lot of people have read my books, the
Yeah,
Paul Sykes books, Sweet Agony. They've seen the documentary. Um, now, people know about Paul Sykes, the boxer, the scary individual, the prisoner. But
yeah,
what a lot of people don't really know is Paul Sykes, the homeless tramp, the vulnerable
right.
victim. Now, you yourself, you're a Wakefield guy. And
Yeah,
you lived that. So, Chris, how old are you?
I'm 52. I'll be 53 on Valentine's Day. So
Right.
I was born in
So
1969.
you were born in what? Sorry.
69.
Right. So Paul Sykes was 46. So so you'll have been about kicking off of 40 when he died. So you grew up in Wakefield. Whereabouts?
Gawthorpe is a little village next to Ossett, West Yorkshire. So, we actually come under Wakefield as a city.
Hmm.
And, you know, my dad was a coal miner, my mum was a home help. So we kind of grew around that kind of industrial age. My granddad lived in Bradford, which I believe was a capital textile of the world at the time. So it was very kind of working class, bringing up. And Gawthorpe was kind of classed as a bit of a rough village, if you know what I mean. And but yeah, I enjoyed it. It was kind of the making of me. Oh, well, I believe so. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was good times. Great times growing up. No cell phones, obviously back then. Just going out and getting dirty, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, good times, mate.
And so you was I dare say you're a proud Yorkshire man.
Yeah,
You've been very familiar. When was the first time you heard that name? Because obviously you had a few incidents, but can you remember
yeah,
before you met him and you started hearing that name, Paul Sykes, a bit like the Loch Ness
yeah.
Monster, Robin Hood in Nottingham. Do you know
I
what I
know,
mean?
right?
Obviously, yeah, you heard the myth before you knew him.
I did, and I was really young. I must have been, I don't know, 8, 9, something like that, possibly 10. But because we lived close by to him, you know, he had a house on Leeds Road End, which was just
Yeah.
around the corner from my sister's friend's house, Lynn. And I
Mm.
lived probably, I don't know, maybe 400 meters away from his house.
So
Yeah, but
before you actually clapped eyes on him, Chris, what were the tales you'd heard about him? What made him so notorious and scary? What kind of things were going on in the area?
well, it was probably late 70s. So I remember, I believe it's a long time ago, obviously, when I was 9 years old. I'm 52 now. But I think I remember my dad driving past his house one time and he was pointing out, oh, that's where Paul Sykes lives. It's like, who's Paul Sykes? Well, he's a tough guy, boxer. You know, Nothing too much about him being a criminal or anything like that. But he was kind of, I believe he was building up for, his boxing career, you know, and heading towards that kind of British championship, possibly world championship.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of saw him back then, being a 9 or 10 year old, you know, this giant of a man, tough guy. We didn't have many celebrities back then around that area. You know what I mean? Other the artists like Henry Moore and stuff like that, but this was obviously a different kind of breed. This was a different kind of character, and I believe my dad driving past his house and just pointing out down that, yeah, that's looked at his door. That's where he lives as we're driving past. And then I would hang out with my sister and a friend because obviously, in the holidays, my mum and dad would be working, so I'd hang out with those two. And apparently, well, she did. She lived just around the corner from him. So he was on Dewsbury Road, and it was also kind of called Leeds Road End back then. And there used to be a Skoda garage right by the roundabout there, and like a Lada garage. And if you just head towards Chickenley, Dewsbury Road, that was kind of where we lived on the right hand side. And I've just recently looked on Google Maps, and it looks like they've kind of built over that, area now.
Yeah.
So I don't believe his house is there anymore.
But like, what were the tales as you was a 9-year-old kid? Was it just this like big Neanderthal caveman who was scary and who could fight anyone,
Yeah.
or was it the sinister tales then, or?
Not so much the sinister tales, just this big, tough guy who was heading towards this kind of world championship, possibly world championship, but definitely heading towards that kind of British title. I mean, I've never seen anyone.
Because a lot of people, I get a lot of stick for this, but it's actually a fact because I've done my research and I've spoken to a lot of boxers. But obviously Paul Sykes was very well beat by John L. Gardner.
Yeah.
But if he'd have beat John L. Gardner, he was going to fight Leon Spinks at the end of '79, and then beat Leon Spinks, who was an Olympian. He was going to fight Larry Holmes. That was the plan for him, to be sidetracked so quickly.
So quickly like that.
It sounds absurd, but that was the plan, and he was only really 2 fights away from a world title at Larry Holmes.
It's crazy. I do believe, I mean, I can't tell you for certain, you'll know the timeline probably better than I do, because I've only just really got back into the Sykes stuff since I started watching the documentary. And again, and you popped up, I thought, this is interesting. And I thought, I've met Sykes like 3 times, 2 as a child and 1 later on. And obviously my mum's stories as well. But I think it was leading up to the Gardner fight. Because obviously
Gardner in June '79. So how did you first meet him then, Chris?
Well, there's two of the meetings, and I believe this is the first one. It was a long time ago, so I'm thinking, which one was it? Which came first? But right by Leeds Road End, there's a roundabout and there's a bus stop right by the garage, the Larder garage. My accent's changed over the years a little bit. And I believe I was with, again, my sister and Lynn, a friend Lynn, and we were going to Dewsbury, because when you're on that side, you're heading towards Dewsbury. And there's a zebra crossing that leads over from there, and Sykes, he was with his girl at the time. I don't know if it was wife or his girlfriend. I mean, you probably know better than I will who that would have been at that time, so you know the timelines. And everyone was kind of like whispering under their breath, and I can remember this stuff, Just pull this down here. And I thought, this is sexy. There's Paul Sykes over there. And this is the first time I saw him. And I'd heard of him, and I thought, holy shit, this guy's a fucking giant. You know what I mean? But he was well dressed. He looked great. And his wife was all well to do and everything. And he walked across, and everyone kind of was stood in a line at the bus stop, side by side. It was almost like he parted the freaking Red Sea. Everyone moved aside as he walked into the bus stop, and he took center stage in the bus stop, which was pretty funny. And I looked up at him, like this. And I was like, oh, this guy's freaking huge. And I knew who it was. And this is true. He actually looked down at me like that. He says, "What are you looking at?" In his like West Yorkshire accent. It's like, "Are you Paul Sykes, the boxer?" It's like, "Of course I am." And that was our first interaction. And he was kind of, I'm a boxer. I'm going for the British Championships and all this kind of stuff. He was talking himself up a little bit. And then not long after that, the bus came, and we all got on the bus, and I was like, sat down looking at the back of his head, couldn't take my eyes off this guy. So I thought it was brilliant. All this talk about him being a fantastic boxer and possibly future world champion. I thought, I'm in the presence of greatness here. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And it was huge. He was massive, mate. I was probably 5 foot at the time. He was 6'3".
6'3" and a half. His full height was. So when was the other time then? And obviously your parents have got. I mean, that's the thing with anyone from the city, Wakefield or around. It's like I spend a lot of time in the east end of London, and everybody has a tale about the craze, and it's like Lee Duffy. You've been around Middlesbrough in the early '90s, and Wakefield is the same. Whether you love him, loved him, think he epitomised evil, there's always some kind of tale someone from Wakefield has. I mean, how did your parents find him then? Because obviously they had a bit of interaction with him.
Yeah, they did. I mean, the second time I met him, you know, obviously being familiar with him now and seen him for the first time. Again, I was hanging out with my sister, and they lived just on the other street. So you know, you could walk around the garage, and then maybe like 200 meters down Dewsbury Road was his house. And
Yeah.
we're all, you know, they're all kind of daring me. Oh, you should knock on Paul Sykes' door and ask for his autograph. You know, I was like, what? You know, it was kind of scary. You know what I mean? But I was a tough Yorkshire. Really didn't give a shite. And they were hiding at the end of the pathway, looking around the wall. You know, at the gate. Well, I walked up to the to the door and knocked on the door. His door, I can remember his door. It was one of those with the big rectangular, you know, piece of glass, like the frosted glass. And I'm thinking, holy shit, you know, I wonder how he's going to react to me, you know, knocking on his door. And I knocked on it, and you could see this kind of image walking towards the door. Shit, it's him, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And says, "Are you Paul Sykes?" He answered the door. He says, "How can I help you?" I says, "Are you Paul Sykes, the boxer?" He says, "Aye, I am, lad." And he said, "Any chance I can get your autograph?" He says, "Of course you can." Yeah. And I had a scrap piece of paper. I didn't have a book or anything like that. You know, I was a freaking miner's son. And it was a scrap piece of paper, probably about yay big. And I gave it to him. And he had to find a pen to write his name. I didn't even have a pen with me, you know. And he leant on the kitchen top. And he had his back to me, and he was writing he just put Paul Sykes. He didn't, didn't ask for my name or anything like that, or, you know, best wishes or anything. He just wrote Paul Sykes on it in his best writing.
You know, his handwriting was probably, I mean, it was like something you'd see off a lawyer or a solicitor, a barrister. It's the same with Lee Duffy's. It was outstanding. I don't suppose you still got it, have you?
Mate, that could be hidden anywhere. I just spoke to my mum the other day, and I told her the story again. I reminded her about it. I said that autograph could be hidden away in any of your, you know, photographs or, you know, your pile of papers you've got in the cupboard. She goes, "Oh, I've never seen it, love." You know, and it's like, well, you know, it's probably lost in time now. But I wish I had it, mate. I really do.
So what were your parents' thoughts on him? I mean, so tell me I know they had a few thingies with him, you know, typical Yorkshire couple. How did they kind of feel towards him?
Well, when I spoke to my mum the other day and she was telling me the stories, I think it says it all. You know, they were like, "Oh, there's Paul Sykes. Don't say anything. Don't look at him." You know, that kind of thing. And she was telling me the first story she told me was when my Uncle Peter came over from Bradford to stay with us for the weekend or something like that. I think he was in early 20s or, you know, that kind of around that area. And they went out drinking. It might have been around Christmas time because they usually come over at Christmas time and take them to the pub and for a few pints and stuff. But they actually went to she said it was the Magnet pub. You might know of it if you've been to Lupset, obviously, and it's in the Lupset area.
That's exactly where I used to go a lot. The Magnet.
Yeah, yeah, and they walked in there, and apparently Paul Sykes was at the bar, and like, oh, you know, Paul Sykes is over there. You know? Like everyone took a breath away, and my dad was saying to Peter, "Don't look at him! Don't look at him! He'll fucking beat you up!" You know. I don't know exactly what year this was, but I'm thinking it was probably around about the same time, you know, as when I asked for his autograph. I'm not sure. And apparently, Peter got on well with him. That he was at the bar, you know, asking him questions. Peter was a bodybuilder and also a karate guy. I really looked up to my Uncle Peter. I thought it was freaking awesome, mate. And apparently they got like an house on fire. You know,
a lot of people have told me they used to say, like, it was like seeing a wild bear, and people would freeze. But if you actually just said, I actually bared, he almost like admired you, like he kind of respected you in a way. And I've met literally hundreds of people over the years now. They all have a tale. Some not nice, but you know, if people went up and went, "Oh, Paul," and and he kind of admired you to do that, and you know, I mean, the tale is not a lot of people are familiar with. You know, you watch a documentary, you hear him talk about the Sharks, you Google him, you find out he died. but you're not. A lot of people aren't really aware of how bad he fell unless you were around it. And you know, his decline, if you like, was started about the millennium. He went into Stanley Royd, 2001. Right. But I would say from 2002, I mean, that picture that I've used for this thumbnail, that was November 2004. So the scary thing is, he lived through another 2.5 years after that. So this is the picture where he's got the jazz hands and he's got a coat on and he was living in a skip. Kids were banging eggs on him. And, you know, were you aware of the rapid decline? You know, even though, I don't know, when was the last time you seen him? Had you heard 2004, 5, 6? What was your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I'm thinking it was about 2000. But going back to that one story with mine called Peter, apparently they got on really well. They were stood at the bar talking to each other. And just to finish the story off, Peter says, "Oh, what do you do?" He says, "Oh, if anyone owes any money," he says, "if I can't pay him," I said, "I fucking go and beat him up." And they were just laughing about it, apparently. So that's the end of that story. That's all I can get at that. I actually asked him, does he know anything else? Can he remember it? He says, no, that's all he remembers, you know. The last time I saw him, I believe it was around, I think it was about 2000, mate. Because I was in Scotland. I was in the military. I was on a Scottish base at the time. And I went down to, you know, for my dad's funeral. I think it was then. I think it was 2000. Because I went for a walk around Wakefield as well. Went to see, you know, walk around the old streets where I, you know, started karate. I actually, you know, trained with Chris Campbell at Josh Johnson's.
I like Chris. Chris has really helped me a great deal with the book. Obviously, the film and the documentary is going to be underway next year. Obviously, COVID permitted. It was supposed to start last year, and Chris really, I'm you know, I'd like him in there, some kind of maybe technical advisor or something. Yeah, he's a lovely guy, Chris Campbell. I've got a lot of time for him. You know, you're obviously well travelled with the military. Do you find when you go around all over Britain, all around the world, have you ever heard people talking about Paul Sykes and you're like, well, hang on a minute, that's from my neck of the woods? He almost put Wakefield on the map, didn't he?
I think so, yeah. He was one of the, definitely one of the guys who put it on the map. I almost called him an icon then, but
absolutely.
Obviously, I think he is iconic. I mean, you know, an icon doesn't have to be something and that's a positive thing. You know, it's the, but he was definitely, you know, I mean, if you think about it, at one point it was a positive thing because he was this Wakefield lad, you know, going for this title fight. But you know, when you think of Wakefield, and you know, when you hear the city of Wakefield, then I think, you know, in a lot of people's mind, Paul Sykes' face does pop up, you know, because that documentary really put him out there as well. But yeah, going back to Chris Campbell, I think he would make a great advisor. In fact, when I started watching the documentary and you popped up, you mentioned Chris in one of your videos. I thought, like, shit, I used to train with that guy. He used to be our instructor. I think it was like a brown belt at the time, but it was also a kickboxer as well. And, you know, I actually reconnected with him, sent him a couple of old photographs of us all, you know, the dojo and stuff. And he says, I must have trained thousands of people over the years, you know, and I actually watched him fight at Rooftop Gardens as well. He did a kickboxing fight, which was really impressive. He was a fucking animal, you know. Super nice guy as well at the same time.
Yeah, Chris is a lovely guy, but he's also a Wakefield taxi driver, so he knows the city probably better than anyone.
I bet.
But you know, I mean, the Lupset estate. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Wakefield over the years. I'm going to have to be there a lot of the times next year. You know, I mean, I knew Wakefield existed. I think I put it in the book. It was a place like Milton Keynes or Coventry. And then obviously I watched the documentary nearly 10 years now. And I was like, what the fuck have I just watched? I was just like, wow. And, you know, I probably obsessed over it for like maybe 3 years. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to walk in. And I walked into Paul Sykes' book, documentary, met all the characters. And to be honest, Chris, a lot of the city of Wakefield holds it against me. They kind of see me as
Right.
kind of digging his ghost up, if you like. But a lot of the things he did, they were well before I mean, I wasn't born till 1980, and
Yeah.
but he's iconic, and whether you love him, he is. Who's probably the most famous person from Wakefield? It's probably Jay McDonald, isn't it?
Yeah. For me, I think
For me,
Sykes beats it. I didn't even know Jay McDonald was from Wakefield, to be honest, mate. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
But
there's
for me,
people when that film
yeah,
starts and the documentary. I mean, the guy who's going to play Sykes is massive, bit of a heartthrob, hasn't been announced yet.
yeah,
80s pop band apparently doing the full soundtrack, and that
that's
is going to
awesome.
be massive news. When that film starts, he'll no longer be this guy on the internet he's going to be a household name.
Gonna go crazy, mate. I think it's gonna be bigger than Chopper, and who else was there? Charles Bronson. I think it's gonna be bigger than that.
I mean, what was your thoughts when Sykes died? I mean, Wakefield police said to me, it was like a lot of us were like happy, sad. A lot of us were like, bloody hell, Sykes is dead. We didn't think he could die. He was like Dracula. He was just like,
I know, right? Like Michael Myers never dies.
Yeah, seriously. And a few people said, you know what? It was an end of an era for Wakefield, because some guy I interviewed, and he said, you know, when Paul Sykes was alive, I used to look at him and he was just part of the furniture, where now he's kind of become this really but back in the day it was just like, oh, it's Paul, he's drinking, he's pissing up a wall, or he's chasing a car, he's shouting at a pigeon or something. But I mean, the FBI, when they watch a documentary, told Gavin Hepworth, I don't know whether you know Gavin Hepworth, the dog handler.
No.
They said he's a psychopath, stroke genius in equal measures, and total complete and utter one-off.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of when I done them books, I almost lost my identity, because all people wanted to talk to me about was Paul Sykes, and when I first watched it in 2012, I was like, how has anyone not done anything on him? Why has his life not been dramatized? Why is there books on him? And I was like, and I seen the potential in him, and I kind of become obsessed with him. But if you could kind of sum him up, Chris, as like a Wakefield proud guy, how do you look back and you remember him?
I think it was, I mean, people might slag me off for this, but I don't give a shit. But because I met him when I was about 30, and he was in a bad way. And I believe it was around 2000, because I'd come home for my dad's funeral and stuff. And I met him as a child.
So you met him. You met him in his prime.
I met him
at the end.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I was talking to my wife. We're both kind of, sensitive individuals. I'm an artist in my spare time and all that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting how you kind of cross paths like that. 2 times as a child. Mum and dad obviously came across him, and then you saw him. I saw him in his prime, and I saw him probably heading out towards his worst times as well. I was, I'll tell you the story. I was walking around Wakefield. I was just going down Queen's Road, which was where the martial arts thing used to be. I was just stomping around the old haunts and stuff, and I went across. I was going to head towards Wakefield Park, so it means going down across Sainsbury's car park, and he was there. He was laying on. It was laying on the wall as you turn in left into Sainsbury's, and I did the same thing when I was a kid. I just went up and I said, "Are you Paul Sykes?" Can't recount every single detail of the conversation, but he says, "Oh, yes, how do you know?" I said, "I met you." I said, "I met you a long time ago." Oh, I got a call. Let me just put this down. There you go. And it's like, really? I said, yeah, I told him about when I knocked on his door and stuff, it brought a smile to his face. And I told him about the bus stop story, about, what are you looking at? That kind of thing. He says, yeah, that sounds about right. That's probably, that's me. And, but he was on guard. He was very guarded. I could tell, because I think at the time when he was in that state, I think people were kind of taking revenge on him, like doing zigzag and stuff like that,
Yeah.
So he was very guarded, because he got up and he says, come on, now let's see what you got. So he was almost like he was, he basically trying to pick a fight with me.
Yeah.
I said, sit down, you daft sod. I'm not here to fight you. I just here to chat. And after that, it was absolutely fine with me. But I think he was very guarded and thinking I was going up there to give him a hiding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to be honest, he was. And this was 7 years before he died, so it wasn't too bad. He still had the big shovel hands, and he was.
A lot of people said.
Sorry, mate, your mic's a bit off, I think. So.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's not as loud as it was before.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'll bring it closer.
Yeah. A lot of people said they used to see him, and even when he was close to the end, he was this big, bushy, bearded, lots of jackets on, but his arms were extra long. And he had
lots of layers on.
Like down his knees.
He had lots of layers on. You could tell he was out there getting cold and stuff. And obviously he had a bit of the beard and everything else, and he looked a bit rough. And he was a bit drunk as well when I actually, which is no surprise, obviously. For all I know, he could have been in Sainsbury's, grabbing a few tins before I saw him, and had a few drinks. But I said, sit down, you'd have to. I'm not here to fight you. And we just chatting away and stuff. And I think there was a lot of regret there, I said, I fucked up and all this kind of stuff over the years. And,
is that what you said?
Yeah. I sat down with him for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I think there was a lot of regret there. Obviously, it's a long time ago. I can't remember much else, but the important, the thing that stood out with me was very guarded when I walked up to him, and he was like almost wanting me to have a go at me. I just said, talking about, sit down, you daft bastard. Let's just have a chat and all that kind of stuff. He was absolutely fine with me. I think he kind of a bit of respect there after that when I told him.
Yeah, he was very guarded, because I remember talking to Peter Fury a couple of years back, and Johnny Nelson, and they both said to me, them people who took liberties with him, they would sneak up and smash eggs on his head. 2004, they poured lighter fluid on him in Thorne Park, and they set him on fire. And Peter Fury said, and Johnny Fury said, Johnny Nelson, he said, them people who done that to him wouldn't have even looked sideways at him. And I suppose his decline was his parents died in 1998, within 12 weeks of each other.
Right. So that kind of makes sense then. I think it was 2000.
So then his wife left him in 99. And the millennium, it was almost like Cinderella. Midnight, and he turned into a pumpkin.
Just went seriously downhill after that.
Yeah, 2001, he had them plants in, where he was drinking and he couldn't. When you'd have a drink, it'd make you violently sick.
Yeah, like Bestie had that, didn't he?
Yes. Well, funny enough, there was only a day between them, There was only 24 hours difference. Yeah. Right. But I know Paul was on there. He gave up alcohol for a long period. He was on Valium. But from 2004, that's when he kind of walked with a hunch. Hands were fucked he couldn't even open a can. And, when you see him then, you think you couldn't get any worse. But it was from about 2004. That's the picture on this thumbnail, like you see him. And obviously he went on to 2007. And, was it karma? Was it social justice? I don't know. But I personally don't think anyone deserved the ending he got. Hang on.
Let's see if I can up the volume on this as well a little bit. Hang on a second.
Yeah, I'm just getting questions. I lived on Chantry Road. Yeah, do you know what? Someone said the Sykes era was over, and that's what it was. It was 2007. Wakefield Police said, you know, I said that's it. It's an end of an era, you know, because he was born 46, and his first time the police ever went to his home was he was about 5 or 6, but his first conviction was when he was about 14. So it was about 1961. So he'd been breaking the law from 1961 to he was in Armley prison the year before he died. So from 1961 until 2006, do the maths, and a lot of police officers. I mean, one guy in particular I spoke to said, you know, I remember him when he was in his prime, and we had to send a full shift from Wood Street Nick to get him. And he said, I remember him at the end when a gush of wind would have blew him over. And it's, once he was gone, it was like, you know, there's a guy in Harrogate called Rudy. I don't know whether you're familiar with him. He was the same. He would, you know, I don't think there'll be anyone who from Wakefield who causes that much kind of mixed emotions ever again. You know, the city, a lot of people have good opinions, bad opinions, but regardless of your thoughts on Paul Sykes, he brings out such a mixture of mixed emotions, Chris, doesn't he?
He does. My wife said, "You want to say hello?" This is Ellie.
Hi, are you from Wakefield, Ellie?
Sorry, what?
The sound's a bit off. She's actually a Californian.
Ah, right, okay. So, yeah. Chris, I mean, have you read all the books then, and are you going to be watching the film and the documentary next year?
Oh, I'd love to watch the film, mate. I haven't read any of your books yet, so, you know. Right. Yeah, I'd love to read them because, obviously, you're the fountain of knowledge. You're the man who probably knows more about Paul Sykes than anyone else.
Yeah, do you know, so, it was listen, I wasn't an author, and 2012 I watched your documentary, and I you know, I remember working on a building site. So I watched a documentary about the summer of 2012, and I was working on a building site about 6 months after, and I heard this Yorkshire accent, and I said, "Where are you from, mate?" He went, "Wakefield," and I went, "Fuck off." And he went, and he looked at me and went, no. And I was just, you know, so I spent like 2013, 2014 trying to research, and I must say about 2015, I thought, well, you know what? Can't be that hard. I'm going to buy a dictaphone. I'm going to walk in the city of Wakefield, meet some of his family, two of his sons, his niece, sister, just they've been in the prison, and just lots of different, you know, and I think obviously Paul's book, he done Sweet Agony.
Yeah,
I think probably the most tragic thing, maybe the most tragic crime Paul ever committed was not doing another book, because
another one.
The only book he ever did, Sweet Agony, was when he was in prison. So basically, he didn't have the discipline, and when he was out, it was the drinking, it was the fighting, it was the women. And, you know, Sweet Agony is, I mean, I had to read it twice to really appreciate it. I've done 3 books, and then other people have done, there's a guy who's done It Sharks. There's a guy called Matthew Oakley. He's recently done Yes, Paul, you know, and I mean, I'm obviously finished with it now, but, you know, there'll be people far more notable than myself coming along, and, you know, the film's signed. It's been signed since 2017. The documentary is happening, and I don't think it'll finish there. I think people more will come and they'll do the books, and you know, regardless of whatever you want to call him, you know, Delroy Showers said to me, who was Paul's mate, he said,
I know of Delroy.
Yeah, he said, you know, was Paul Sykes successful? He said he left a trail of notoriety, and notoriety itself is a form of success. And I mean, Paul Sykes, I was talking to Kenny you know, from the documentary, the old tailor.
Oh yeah.
And he said to me once, he said, every time Paul used to come in my house, he would say, Kenny lad, he said, they're gonna write books about me in years to come. People are gonna come and they make films on me. And he was right. And
He was right.
yeah, you know, and I think, you know, people think to be successful, you've got to have the money and the cars. And listen, he died a shell of a man. He died broken and a very tragic figure. But he's been gone now nearly 15 years. And I think certainly in my lifetime, he won't be forgotten about. And I mean, how often does he get spoken around your way then, around Wakefield and now?
Well, I haven't been back to Wakefield, mate, to be honest, because I live in California now. But,
all right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was back in the Wakefield area about 2003 to 2006. I didn't actually come across Paul by then, but you would read about him in the papers and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
He was. I mean, I've spoken to lots of reporters from the Wakefield Express, and they said, you know what? He was brilliant for us because every week he would be there was, you know, whether he was pissing up his bus shelter, he was always doing things, walking in a shop, buying a kebab and walking out. And I spoke to a few shop people, and they said, I think it was one girl in Morrison's, and he said sometimes when, like, if Paul would come in and steal things, we'd put it down as like shop loss, you know, like as if, well, Paul Sykes is kind of like, we'll just put it down to damaged goods because, he, you know, he was just, he'd nick a can of beer or something, and people didn't want to ring the police. You know, it was better to just say, Paul, just take the can of beer.
Didn't want to cause a commotion, just let him go and
go on. And you know, regardless of your emotions, listen, there was people who had parties, but there was a lot of sad people. I mean, by the end of his life, he was very well into the going to church. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, initially he started going along just for free biscuits and free cups of tea and that. But I mean, I've spoken to a lot of them, and they said he actually did have Jesus in his heart towards the end of his life. And his funeral, I mean, although it was guarded because they didn't put it in the papers for the publicity, it was massive, and I mean massive.
Oh wow!
I spoke to several people who were there. Neil Malpass, who fought Paul a couple of times, and I mean, even the funeral, I forgot what they were called, Bells in Wakefield. I know where you know him. At the end of it, he said, "You know what? That's the best funeral I've ever been to," and that was his business.
Really?
Seriously, yeah.
Paul would have loved that, wouldn't he? He would have loved that.
Yeah.
He's buried in Almathorpe, right? Is it Almathorpe Cemetery where he's buried?
Yeah, he's buried next to his parents, Walter and Betty Sykes, and on his gravestone it had always look on the bright side of life, which of course was his song. That was played at his funeral as well, and you know, every single day. I mean, I've spoken to so many different people, solicitors, and you know, and I'd always see Paul, and he was complete dishevelled and fucked and all that. And he'd always say to them, always look on the bright side of life. So every time I hear that song, I think of Paul Sykes. And I think...
So even in the state that he was still like, you know, vibing out positivity for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's tragic. And even at the end of his life, I mean, I won't name them, but I know there was a guy who broke Paul's arm about a year before he died.
Right.
And this guy was a young kid, come from like a tough family. And the police said, all right, Paul. And they said, do you want to give a statement? And he just smiled and he said, look, I'm not going to give a statement. He said, listen, I know why this is happening to me in my life. I know why it's going to do it. And he just accepted it. And yeah, it's I know what he was. Listen, there's been some stories I've come across with Paul Sykes' journey that I didn't even include in the book because I don't want my name linked to stuff like that. But
right.
Yeah, you know, some
So there's going to be a lot of stuff that's left out, probably, of the books and the movie and everything else in the documentary, right?
You know, I mean, they've announced the official synopsis for the Blair the book So the
Yeah.
film, sorry, the film. So the
For
film's
the
going to
film.
start in the 1989. So that's basically when he was released from prison. That documentary.
That's right. The start of the documentary, right? Yeah.
So the film was going to start from Paul Sykes being 43 years old.
Well, to his
and
death.
Yes, and you know, the actor, he's a bit of a heartthrob. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, I sent him the books a couple of years back, and he was a pantomime, and he said I've started practicing my Yorkshire accent. He said the biggest thing appeals to me about playing Paul Sykes is the social justice side of it all. You know, he was a bad guy. He got his comeuppance, but I tell you what, Chris, it's going to take one hell of a skilled actor to play Paul Sykes. That's for sure.
I know. Yeah, for sure. He was definitely an interesting character, a powerful character too. You know, to be able to get into character and put that onto the screen, it's going to be huge. It's going to be a massive.
I mean, I spoke to I mean, John Spencer was the reason who got him his British Boxing Border Control license.
Yeah.
And
I saw the talk with you and John. It was hilarious.
Yeah, and he said, you know, I sat him in my company before with what was a snooker player called Alex Higgins, and there was a football manager called Malcolm Allison, and he said, John, where did you find him from? He said he was like a comedian. He said he was just the funniest, most charming man you could ever meet, but at the same time, he was a violent psychopath. He said, like, when he had a snooker hall in Middlesbrough called In Off the Park, and there was literally people not wanting to come in the pub because Paul was
in there.
Yeah, and you know, John had staff leaving because he was there all the time, and but yeah, he was an unbelievable character. Do you want to? It
was interesting because the second story of go on, mate.
Sorry, go on. Tell me the second story then.
Yeah, the second story of my mum and dad, like you mentioned about people wouldn't go to pubs and stuff. This is what she told me the other day. They were actually not too far from his house in a pub called The Mill, which is just around the corner from that Skoda garage that I told you about. And apparently it was barred from this pub. And he walked in, and my mum and dad were at the bar, and like, oh shit, you know, it was like that reaction again. Oh, Paul Sykes is here again. You know what I mean? Don't look at him. Don't look at him.
So your mom was all, don't look at him, love.
Don't look at him, love. Because my dad, you know, he was a tough guy. He was a tough miner, played rugby and all that kind of stuff, and would never usually back down from a fight and stuff. She was like, don't look at him. Don't look at him, love. But surprise has it, he came up and it was absolutely fine with them. You know, was talking to them. You know, he says, "Do you have kids?" And says, "Oh yeah, we've got 2." And he says, "Well, you will be there, won't you?" Because my mum was a good-looking woman, you know what I mean? So he was kind of joking then, and he must have been in a good mood and not had too many drinks, but he was absolutely fine with them. That was the second story I want to tell you as well. Yeah,
do you know, I've met people, and I mean, they said when he would walk in, I mean, listen, there was some bad stories that this isn't hearsay. This is what people have said, and he's walked in, and he said, "You're buying me a pint. You're buying me a pint. You're buying me a pint." And you know, when he's been in a really funny mood, he's made people stand up and sing like Humpty Dumpty or blah blah blah.
Like standing on a pool table and make him sing a song.
Yeah, he was quite sadistic in that manner, you know. But he was just an unbelievable character. And a lot of people, when you see the Paul Sykes at large and he's talking about sharks, and you think he has to be some made up. He has to be like Keith Lemon here. And when you go and indulge in the story and you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, you think, bloody hell, this guy existed, you know. And
that guy he could talk. It's like, you know, how can you make that stuff up? He sat there in the backyard on his chair talking about the shark story. He was just reeling it off.
Well, do you know, a lot of people will not believe that. But the story he told Paul's carer, I mean, it was in Lagos. Was it Lagos? It's in one of my books. But
was it
basically
Singapore or something?
Yeah, he thought he was getting shot at because he'd done a run from a hotel.
It was the Sharks. It was
£16,000 casino. and he thought, I'm getting shot at, and it was baby sharks, and he said he just turned around and started punching a few. But people think, oh, full of shit. But listen, the Straits of Johor was only 0.6 of a mile.
Right.
And Sykes was a phenomenal swimmer.
He was a lifeguard, wasn't he, in Blackpool, I believe?
Yes, he saved someone's life. He was on the Blackpool paper, the front page, about 1973, 74.
Wow.
And he actually, his lifeguard career, you know, you do your survival and your silver and your bronze, and there was nothing else he could have won as a swimmer. He was absolutely phenomenal.
Well,
you know, and
some a lot of people, for it.
Yeah, you know, John Spenceley said to me, he said, do you know, obviously people know Paul Sykes, the drunk, the smoking, but years ago you couldn't even smoke in his company. Before he went pro, I mean, I've met people who were in Durham prison with him, and they said no one on the whole wing could smoke.
He banned them from smoking.
It's unbelievable, but
it is.
Yeah, I think when the film starts and the documentary, I think it'll just be like the Great Fire of London. It'll just go absolutely crazy. And you know, at the minute, there's not a great deal on Paul Sykes. And when the film comes out, the documentary, I think there'll be more books, and I think people will get more and more gripped and cultivated with the whole story.
Right. Well, they'd have to do a lot of research for that, wouldn't they? Because how long did you research him? Like 3 years before you started your first book?
See, I mean, I sat in the archives, and you just literally have to look at the Wakefield Express and just literally look at every single paper. But I know his life pretty much. And I mean, you know, in the greatest of respect, I mean, I've spoken to several members of Sykes's family. Some are all for it and some aren't. You know, even though a lot of my books, well, I mean, the Paul Sykes books support great causes. And a lot of people have said to me, how can, like for instance, the Bradley Lowry Foundation, and people are saying, well, how can you tag that little angel with a monster? And it's, you know, it's I like, you know, because you know what Paul Sykes was about, and when I've done these books on your characters, like your Lee Duffy's, your Roy Shaw, I like some goodness to come from it. And the facts of the matter is they've raised a lot of money for great causes. So has anyone got any questions for Chris? Jamie, what's happening with the unreleased film? So the film's going to happen next year, Glenn. There's going to be a film and there's going to be a documentary. We've already spoke about that in this. So is there anything you wanted to add, Chris, before I let you go?
Yeah. What I was going to ask you was, obviously being a writer and everything else, we're actually, you know, my missus is a writer, and we're going to, you know, illustrate the books and stuff, more children's books and everything else. I was going to ask you, how does it feel? Because if it wasn't for your books, this film wouldn't exist or start filming.
You know something?
Next year. How's that feel to you?
Well, I wasn't an author. And when I went to meet Roger Greenwood and Nick Lord, they made Paul Sykes at Large. And I went to meet them in the Majestic, which is probably the most poshest hotel in Harrogate. Now, we chose that because that's where they met Paul for the filming of the Paul Sykes at Large. And I was like, look, I'm going to do these books. And they just sat back and they laughed at me and they were like, you're not an author, are you? And I was like, well, no, I'm not. But, and I went with Paul's sister, and she decided that it was too upsetting for her to which I fully understood. I had 37 photos of Paul Sykes and I deleted them.
Well,
you know, it was too painful for her. And but I just, you know, if I'd never watched Paul Sykes, Chris, I would never have written a book in my life. And it wasn't about the money at the start. I just thought, listen, I want to know about this guy. I'll do it for free if I have to. Right. Done one book, bestseller. Done another book, Amazon bestseller. And it was about July 2007 when my publishers ran me and they said, Western Edge Pictures have been in touch and they want to make a film from your books. And I was like pissed off. And he said, no, anyway. So Western Edge
What was that?
Pictures, they made Oscar Pistorius film, Billy
Yeah,
Piper, Rare Beast. But back at
Joe
the time,
Calzaghe.
Joe Calzaghe.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, so what they wanted to do is so that Sweet Agony, which was done by Paul Sykes, then they've got Unfinished Agony, Further Agony, and Final Agony. So them 4 books have been merged together, and that's how the script has been written.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
Okay.
it was just a labour of love. I didn't know whether I was any good. I didn't know whether I'd be laughed out of town. All I knew is I wanted to find out about Paul Sykes, and I did that. And then, you know, writing becomes addictive, because when you've done what you set out to do, you're like, what do I do now? And then I was like, you know, and then obviously 4 years later, I'd done 19 books in 4 years.
That's amazing.
And,
in 4 years?
Yeah, it was probably made me the most prolific author in Great Britain. But that's purely, and I have to thank Paul Sykes down to that, because if I'd never watched
I was just
that,
thinking that. I was just
if I'd
thinking,
never
if it weren't
watched
for
that
Paul
documentary,
Sykes, you know, he kind of kickstarted, didn't he?
oh, 1,000,000%. I would have
Yeah.
done that book for free. And then it started selling in the thousands and tens of, and then all of a sudden, all these Jamie Boyles started popping out, thinking, I'm obsessed with Paul Sykes. I want to know this, I want to know that. And you know, it was due to start in September last year. Obviously, COVID ruined that. But apparently, it's going to start next year in the summer. And how big is it going to be, Chris? Well, how big is a piece of string? I don't know. But I know, listen, the guy who's going to play Sykes is a household name. He's a heartthrob. There's the main 80s band from the 80s doing the soundtrack.
Nice one. Is that a Yorkshire band, or is it from somewhere else?
It's going to be filmed in Wakefield, Pontefract, and Leeds, I've been told.
Yeah. Is the pop group, are they from Yorkshire, Jamie?
No, but they're probably the biggest in the 80s. That's who they're going to do the full soundtrack. So that's where a lot of the money is. That's where the negotiating is kind of. But I've got to ask the question: did I ever meet Paul Sykes' wife, the Moss? Well, Paul Sykes had 3 wives. I've been to stay with one, great friends with one, and the other 2 don't really want to be mentioned. So I've got to. In fact, none of them want to be mentioned. So I've got to respect the wishes. But I've been to stay with one of them a few times, and great friends. And you know, as you can imagine, being married to someone like that, he brings up painful memories. And let's just leave it at that. But yeah, listen, I mean, you know, you've moved to the other side of the world now, and how does it feel when people are still talking about this guy, Chris, that you once met at a bus stop? And people, you know, I always say YouTube come a bit too late for Paul Sykes, because he died in March 2007.
Yeah.
And I think YouTube come along in November 2006. So if people had knew who he was, I mean, obviously certain people did, but you know, if, say for instance, now the guy from YouTube, he would have been a legend. He would have been a hero. There would have been people. I wouldn't have got near him, because there'd have been Guy Ritchie's and all this, and you know what the guy did in his life. He died 60, but he looked about 90.
Yeah, he was
he
pretty
did a lot of bad. Let's be honest. He did a lot of wicked acts. But I don't know. Did he get his karma? I don't know. I think only God can be the judge of that. But it's definitely a sad, tragic, harrowing tale, Chris.
I know. Just going back to you as a writer, as an author, how difficult was it? You know, I don't know how it works in the UK, but did you have to get an agent to get you a publisher, or did you go straight to the publisher? How difficult was it to get the book published?
I was lucky because I'd say for instance, that Paul Sykes book, I think I'd interviewed 50 people.
Yeah.
So, and the second one was about 35. So because I took up, listen, if I'd done a book, say, I don't know, The Lake District by Jamie Boyle, it would have been like a needle in a haystack, because I'm a nobody. You know, everyone, we all want to be the next pop band or whatever, and it's like you 1 in 100,000 chance. But because I picked such a highly controversial, mixed, notable, the Paul Sykes books I call have the wow factor. And what I mean by that is, when I've done books on Lee Duffy or Paul Sykes or this Alan Thompson, people will nick off work. People will ring in work bad, and they're obsessed. And you know, for instance, when I'd done the Lee Duffy one, that was the biggest seller. I mean, by a local author in the shop, and 30 in 1 month were stolen. Wow. So because I'd done Paul Sykes, I was lucky. So I got the attention of everyone. Yeah. Hence the reason Western Edge Pictures contacting Warcry Publishing and saying, "Are you Jamie Boyle's author? Because we want to buy the script and make it a film."
That's amazing.
So if I want to do a book tomorrow called Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, no one gives a shit about me. I'm a nobody. My story's a nobody. But if I want to do a book on someone unbelievable like Paul Sykes or I don't know, O.J. Simpson or someone like the whole world would sit up and take notes. So I was lucky. And if I did a third book called Tales of Pugilism, which didn't really hit the heights. So if I'd have done that as my first book, it would have flopped. But you know, we've all seen, there's been millions of people seen Paul Sykes on YouTube. So people knew who he was, they knew what he was about, but they didn't really fully understand. So to answer your question, if you're going to write a book, find someone unbelievable that the world will sit up and take notice. Otherwise, you're pissing against the wind, and everyone is writing books. So you've got to find that secret special niche that people just go, you know what? Yeah. Fuck it, I'll buy your book if it's there. It's, you know, and that's why I was lucky.
Yeah. Did you get any rejections, or did it come to fruition pretty quickly? You know, with the book.
If I'm honest, I had people kind of falling over me purely because of Paul Sykes, nothing to do with me. So I'd built this Facebook page for like in the May 2005. So I released my book on Paul Sykes' 10th anniversary of his death.
Yeah.
So I had this book building up for 22 months. So by the time the book was out, there was 5,000 people on the page, and half of them wanted to buy it. Wow. So you know, listen, if I'd have done anything other than Paul Sykes, I would have struggled.
Yeah.
And I've done books on people not as big as Paul Sykes, and I fell flat on my face. And I thought, you know what? It's a lesson learned, and you know, go and hunt for more peculiar, rough diamonds, if you like. Some people are just like, wow, you know. And Paul Sykes has that. I've become infatuated with him, and as I said, I would have done the full book for nothing. I would have did it. So you're better off finding a labour of love, something that you can put your full self into, because, you know, if I'd have had to do a book about cricket or something, I'd have lost. So that was really where, you know, so you need to basically find what's your biggest passion. What is your biggest passion, Chris?
Oh, it's got to be the art, and I train jiu-jitsu as well.
Right, so there you go. There's your first book, jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I'm just the illustrator. She's the writer.
Yeah. So there you go. You know, if I wanted to do a book tomorrow, about some old footballer who thought he could have made it and he couldn't, and or some old pissed in the pub who thought he was hard. It's really, really hard work, but because I've done books such as some of the figures I've done, that's what really kind of captivates people. And Paul Sykes, whether you want to read it because you absolutely hated him or whether you're just blown away like I was, you'll buy the book. And obviously the sales of the book are proof of exactly what I've just said.
Of course, yeah. And I think even if people did hate him, I think there's going to be some intrigue there that I think they're still going to read the book just because they knew who he was and lived in the area and he was part of, Wakefield.
Listen, I've spoken to a Wakefield police officer. I spoke to 4 different ones. 4 different ones for the book, I think. But I spoke to more. But I spoke to one and he said, I went to watch Paul Sykes box at the Wakefield Centre because I wanted to see him get knocked out. So there you go. And I mean, Chris Campbell told me the story. He said he picked 2 lads up, and it must have been about a year before he died. And these 2 lads, young lads, 17, 18, got in the car, and he said, "Mr. Drive." So Chris, he picked up and he said, "What?" And he could hear him, and these 2 lads were bragging about how much of a good Arden they'd just given Paul Sykes. Right. And listen, there's a lot of people in Wakefield who give Paul Sykes a good Arden, but there's only really one who beat Paul Sykes in his prime, and that was Terry Mitchell, and that was 1979. Okay. But anyone else? I mean, Sykes did lose a lot of fights after about 1996. And he had good Ardens on a weekly basis from about 2002. But them were just taking liberties with an old man who would piss and shit himself every day, could hardly walk. Lots of people would beat him up when he was drunk on the floor, and Sykes wasn't even aware of it. That's how kind of bad it got. Yeah. One woman said to me, he said, I watched him once, and these 2 lads were kicking him. And he said Sykes was oblivious to it. Probably the next day he woke up and was totally, never knew. Obviously got a few bumps. And she just said to the lads, you wouldn't have done that a few years ago. But that's how bad it got. So, listen, some people will say it was karma. But I mean this when I say this. If I say he repaid, if God paid him back for every wrong thing he ever done 10 times over, that wouldn't be an exaggeration, because the end of his life was truly horrific.
Yeah, it was. Really sad. I remember seeing him, it was like 2000, and he still had 7 years left. He was in a bad way then, So I couldn't imagine what it looked like in 2007.
Oh, yeah. A lot of them. I mean, I know one guy, I won't name him, but he said he treated him once, took him for some dinner. And I said, I was sat watching the meeting and I was thinking, how are you still alive? Do you know? Yeah. And he said it was only about 8 months later he died. And when he died, I thought, not in a nasty way, I thought, I'm glad, because you're not here to live any more pain and suffering. When the documentary comes out, obviously it's going to be my job to round up the Delroy Showers, the Michael Showers, the John Spenceys, the Clive Broughtons. I mean, some people who were really close to Paul, I put in the book, your Ronnie Trelfalls, your Davy Dunfords, they're sadly no longer here. But I want the people who were around, and I think that's when the full picture is going to come out, not with the film, but with the documentary. Because they're, the people who, like his carers, when he wouldn't leave the house, he was too scared to leave the house, and he'd just sit in his house reminiscing, drinking his special brew, having a joint. Very sad, very, very tragic.
When was that? when was that? When he wouldn't leave the house? What period of time was that?
Well, he had a number of houses, but his life was as low as you could get from 2002.
Yeah.
So he was in Stanley Royd 2001. That was all when he was. That was still when people would see him wearing his black leather jacket. But 2002 was when the arthritis. That was when the diabetes got hold of him. And when he was kind of walking about, he was kind of, you know, he was in prison.
Limping and stuff.
11 months.
Yeah.
11 months before he died. And you know, once upon a time, he was. There's a saying, which is the loudest in the room is usually the weakest and can't fight. Well, you could forget about that because Paul Sykes was loud and he could fight like the devil.
Yeah, and he could.
But he said, you know, I used to sit and watch him in Armley, and he said he'd just sit there talking to the pigeons, and he said prison wasn't the environment for him. You know, once upon a time, he'd be in the governor's faces. When 2006, 2005, all he wanted to do was kind of just blend in. And yeah, but 2003 to, like, you know, when he was living in what was Peterson Road, I think was his address on his death certificate. But he lived. I tell you where he lived. Do you know where? Do you remember where Kenny's shop was on Westgate?
Yeah, I know Westgate well.
Do you know where the Beck is?
Near
the prison.
What? Oh, the prison?
Bourne Lane. He had a library. Not a library. He had a flat near the library. You know, and he just basically, he was just waiting to die. I mean, I went.
So the road going up to the prison, that road there going.
Yes, I mean
between the brewery,
I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I went to. I went to visit Paul Sykes Jr., who, well, he's committed murder, and he said basically, I mean, Paul Jr. killed a guy 2004, but he said for the last 2 years, 2003, 2004, he said, my dad, he said he would just say, I wish I'd never woke up today. He was just waiting for death. And, you know, when you can Google Paul Sykes and you see the pictures, but, you know, some of the details I know, you think, Jesus Christ. And there was a place in Wakefield which really helped him. And they'd done a lot for Paul Sykes. And in the last 8 or 9 months of his lives, he never committed any kind of crimes. Because a lot of the times in his life, towards the end, he'd hand himself in because he wanted to go on remand because his life was that shit, where he's been terrorized with the kids.
Somewhere to, with a roof over his head.
The young kids would literally hunt him in the packs.
Wow.
Hang on,
going back to the. No, what's interesting is when I was bringing these stories up to my wife and stuff about especially the last one. You know, I was thinking back, and just for like a whole week, I was thinking, you know, this is I'm talking about now. I was thinking, thinking back, I wish I could have done more for him that day. The last time I saw him in 2000, but you know, if I'd have had my own place in Yorkshire, I was living in Scotland at the time. I was down from my dad's funeral, like I mentioned earlier. You know, I would have taken him to my house and given him a bath and cooked him a breakfast.
You know what? Honestly, Chris, I've had dozens of people say that to me. I mean, you know, I mean, anyone who could, if you'd have went and seen him and recorded his story, oh man, it would have. A lot of people think he's a bullshit, but apparently some of the people who knew really close to him said he wouldn't tell lies. But honestly, I mean, lots of people have said to me, you know, I wish. I mean, well, here's one guy. I forgot what he's called. He's in the book. And he said it was about a year before he died. He said, I was opening up one morning on the bottom of, was it Kirkgate? And he said, I seen Paul stood there with a can.
Right.
And I just said, what the fuck are you looking at? And Paul just kind of looked and he went, oh, how was it? The guy said to him, what the fuck are you looking at, you has-been? And Paul just kind of looked back drunk and he said, better a has-been than a never was-been. And he said, you know what? He said, he got me. He said, I never had an answer. And
it was like drunk and coming out with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He still had the one-liners when he was drunk.
And he thought, you know what? He said, I just stood there, looked at him, and I just walked. He said, I couldn't answer because I'm a never was been, and he's a has been, and that's the gripping kind of fascination with Paul Sykes, where you want to know more. Yes, you know he was an abused child. Yes, you know he was a vulnerable old adult, but how did he get that way? Yes, he was institutionalized.
Yeah.
You know, but
abused
honestly,
by his dad. Yeah, his mum didn't give a shit. You know, it was
well,
just
I'll tell you what,
combination of things.
Yeah, you know, the film script is already written. I've never read it yet, but it's been written by Vaughan Civil and a very skilled film screenwriter called Leo Bill. But
looking forward to it, mate.
I don't know anything about it. All I know is it starts off from 1989 and it's going to be some kind of like comedy. From what I've been told, I think it's going to be almost like Rita Sue Bob 2-ish.
Yeah, I saw that many years ago. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, you know,
going back to when I last saw him, when it was playing on my mind just recently, the whole week, I was thinking, I wish I could have more. I was like, it's interesting what the universe brings you, because that week I was in like a 99-cent store. I was in like a pound store back in England, and I was in line getting my stuff that I wanted, and there was this homeless guy. He was homeless, in a massive rucksack on his back, young guy, probably in his 20s, like tires on it, bike tires strapped to his rucksack. He had a bike outside. It was a mess. It was pissing down outside. It was soaked to the bone, and he was took his rucksack off and he was fumbling around trying to find his his money. I was thinking, don't worry about it, man. I got this for you. It's amazing what the universe brings you. There I was all week thinking about, I wish I could have done more for Paul Sykes that day. You know, I only spent 10 minutes from him, but I couldn't take it on to see my mother. My mother was going to eat shit. You know?
Yeah.
By the way, I brought Paul Sykes on.
You wouldn't believe some of the famous people obsessed with Paul Sykes, and I mean obsessed.
Yeah.
Ricky Gervais, Robbie Williams, Jamie Carragher. Oh God, I've spoken to some people who they probably wouldn't like me mention them, like Premiership football managers.
Yeah.
You know, and you're just absolutely intrigued.
Also the documentary and read your books. Pretty amazing, mate.
Yeah, have you heard of the League of Gentlemen? I
have. Yeah, my dad used to love that, apparently.
Yeah. They're massive fans of the Paul Sykes story.
Really?
Honestly, see, like some of the people that have contacted me, and I thought, how do you even know my name? But of course, it's Paul Sykes. Nothing to do with me. It's the Paul Sykes story.
The story.
So,
how does it feel? Here's a question for you. You know, knowing the documentary makers, is it Roger Greenwood? I think you mentioned his name. Has he ever contacted you? You know, knowing what he knows now, and you'd written the books and everything else, and initially he says, "Well, you're not even an author." But has he ever contacted you? Has he ever said anything? How many comments about your journey and your books? And
he was going to give me a massive. He was going to be involved.
Right.
And then he said, "Well, what's in it for us?" That's exactly. And I said, "Look, I'm quite happy to work with you on it." So he ummed and ahed, and then my publishers contacted him. So I met him 2015. So my publisher had a chat with him about 2018, and he went, yes, I remember that lad. And they said, well, he's done this book and he's done that book and it's going to be a film. And he was like, but see, I know from talking to Roger Greenwood and Nick Lord that the Paul Sykes documentary there was 56 minutes of it shot.
Yeah.
But there was 20 to 30 hours of unseen footage not used.
That is crazy.
So,
that's gold, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So when the film happens, when the documentary happens, there's no doubt all this footage will come. Because,
yeah, I would imagine. I would imagine that, especially when he said, "What's in it for me?" You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, I mean, I sat with him and he was telling me, he was showing me magazines about the Lupset Boys Club, and, you know, he was telling me stories about when Paul hit him, because he hit both of them when filming.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, he told me lots of stories. And I'm just sat there thinking, so, you know, I suppose they were kind of curious about me and I was curious about them, but I was sat there, but I was taking everything in. Do you know what I mean? And
right. Yeah, you were doing your job, basically.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one thing now, which they probably will come out, is ITV charge £400 per second. So when Paul Sykes
for the
YouTube,
documentary being on YouTube? Wow.
Yeah, so that's why when it gets put on, it gets took off really quickly.
All the time,
so, I mean, they've said to me, we've got all this. I mean, they have got photos because I've seen them all. You know, and this is when the film comes out, the documentary comes out. This is when all the people will come out and look for the 2 pennies worth. Just got a couple of questions, Chris.
Yeah.
Is the same when Charles Bronson got sentenced for taking? Yeah, that's him. High security. Terry Mitchell was gruesome. Yeah, Terry Mitchell was the only guy who beat Paul Sykes. In actual fact, Terry Mitchell was the reason why Lenny McLean against Paul Sykes was cancelled.
Oh, he got a cut on his eye, didn't he, or something?
18 stitches. Paul Sykes, did he ever say? Yes, he had a disabled son. He's got 7 or 8 sons I know of.
Wow.
So yeah. Yeah, it's am I going to be doing a book on Ducko? No, I'm finished with the middle of the books, mate. Finished with the middle of the books until Neil Booth rings me, or Paul Venice, or Chris Rea rings me. But yeah, no, listen, the Paul. I mean, you know, it's been nice to talk to you, Chris, because
likewise, mate.
You're a wakey lad.
Yep.
And how do you look back now? I mean, do you ever, when you talk to your uncles or your cousins or your mum and dad, and, you know, I mean, I spoke to a top chief of Wakefield Police a couple of years back, and he said, you know what? He said, every single year, when we go to the Wood Street Nick Christmas party, like the old police officers, he said, Paul Sykes always comes up. Someone will always just bring a Paul Sykes story up about, you remember when he knocked you out, or do you remember when he spat at you, or, you know, and it's, Wakefield will just never see a professional criminal ever like him again, will they?
Never. It's going to be amazing after the film comes out. You know, what will be next for Paul Sykes? Are they going to make a memorial for him? You know what I mean? You never know. They could actually, you know, make a statue or a sculpture, stick it up in Wakefield. Who knows?
Well, you know what? I've got a story for you, right? Now, when I released the first book, 2017, I released it on the 10th anniversary of Paul's death. So the book went mental, like crackers. And so people were going in Waterstones and Wakefield, and they wouldn't stock it. Do you know why they wouldn't stock it?
Just for the nature of Paul Sykes, no, he was. I don't know.
Because most of the staff, this is what they told me.
Yeah.
The staff were still in that shop, and they remembered him abusing him. So them staff been in that shop, like,
so they had personal interactions with him,
Yeah, so when he was shouting at them and pouring stuff on them, and so they still had the scars, and they just said, we don't want his face in our book, even though everyone was going in demanding to buy this book and it would have been great. They just refused to stock it.
Wow. So they sacrificed all those, you know, all the money they could have made from it, just, you know, to say
it was just basically too recent for them.
Yeah. So going back to your books again, with regards to being a bestseller, how do you become a bestseller? What's involved in that?
So there's different sections. I mean, I've had 10 Amazon bestsellers.
Yeah.
And I've had 1 Waterstones. Now the Waterstones is better than the whole 10 of them put together. So,
wow.
For instance, you can be a bestseller in the boxing section, which changes hourly, or I think every 2 hourly. Like, say, for instance, I sold 136 in 1 day in a true crime one, and that become a bestseller. But there was a boxing one, and it sold 5 in an hour, and that become a bestseller.
Okay.
So, it changes. And obviously, the true crime genre is much
it's
more.
Probably the most popular genre, isn't it?
Yes. So it's much more harder to crack than, say, for instance, I done a book called Bob and Dave about parody comedy. So that was a bestseller, but that probably sold about 7 in an hour. Where to be a bestseller in the true crime, you probably need about 150 sales.
Okay. Yeah,
But of course, it just depends. There's different sections, and some are impossible, and some are just like, it's dead easy. But that the ones that's easy, they don't really sell. So an Amazon bestseller sounds a lot better than what it is.
Right. What's next for you then, Jamie? I hear you're doing something on Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
I've already done that one.
So that's I know it's true crime, but I consider that to be it's more social history because it's
historical.
Like 30+ years. So I've got Hartlepool Born and Bred 2 finished, and I've started Michael Showers. So that's members only. So that's about the Liverpool crime lord.
Yeah.
Have you heard of a boxer called Junior Witter?
No, I haven't.
So I'm going to be starting his book in the new year. I just want to get into footballers, boxers, celebrities. Hopefully, doing some work with Alex Reid, because true crime, it's probably the most exciting, but it's the one where you get the most death threats, and you've got old age pensioners wanting to fight you. You've got 10 stone ring and wet teenagers want to fight you. It brings a lot of drama, to be honest. So I'm going to have a break from true crime. Obviously, I'm going to have to be in Wakefield a lot when the film happens and when the documentary happens. I don't think that's going to start until about May. Western Edge Pictures said to me the best time to make a film is in the summer. So it was due to start next year. But with this COVID, I just don't know. I have no idea. Could be a couple of years. I don't know. It's literally the next thing on the list for them to do.
Awesome, mate. I'm really looking forward to it. I'd be interested to see who's playing him and kind of comparing the two. You know what I mean?
Do you know what? He's a double of him. And when you
I've been trying to rack my brain who this could be.
He's a heartthrob. He is 6 foot. He knows he's going to put weight on. He knows he's going to do the boxing training. And when he's got dark hair, when he does his hair like Paul, and when he puts I've got a picture of him mustache. You're like, fucking hell.
Just like a spin image.
Yeah, do you know something? The director, Vaughan Civil, didn't ask him. He said, I'm going to write this film about Paul Sykes, and you are going to play Paul Sykes for me. That's how it was. And
that's a bit necky, isn't it?
And he said to me when he's read the books, because I spoke to him a couple of years back. He was in Panto, and he said, I'm working about 12, 14 hours a day. But when I'm not working, I'm reading Paul Sykes and I'm watching him. there's all the little traits of like walking with his hands behind his back, carrying a
getting
can.
those mannerisms and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, all the little kind of. Oh, he's, you know, I mean, apparently he's practicing his Yorkshire accent. I haven't heard it yet, but when it's announced, people will be like, wow. Because a lot of people are saying, oh, it's Ralph Ianson.
Ralph
Have you heard of
Fiennes.
him?
I have, yeah.
Have you heard of him?
I've heard of Ralph Fiennes, yeah.
Who else is there? Another one. There's a couple, but this guy, I can't think of anyone better.
Yeah.
And I told him on Twitter, I said, you look like Paul Sykes. And he said, it's funny you should say that because so-and-so just asked me to play him. I said, well, actually, I know because I done the book. But it's going to be massive. And, you know, the budget's there. I don't know how big it'll be. You know, will it be Leicester Square red carpets or will it be a bargain bin? I've got no idea. But all I know is the budget's there, £2 million, which apparently to make a film is not that much, according to making films. That's what the film directors have told me.
Yeah.
But you know, the time it's been going on now for 4.5 years, and they said to me, to making films, this is nothing. Sometimes making films take years.
Yeah, for sure.
The Wakefield Press, they've done the story a couple of times, and they'll, you know, there's a lot of things I know, but I can't tell them because I'd get shot. The film thingy. But next year, mate, it's going to be there. And the next time you're back in Britain, give us a shout, and we'll have to meet up and Wakefield.
That'd be awesome, mate. We'll go down Wakey. No worries. It's been a pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on. And, you know, sorry my stories weren't longer than sorry my stories weren't as long as, you know, as I'd like them to be, but
no,
basically
you know what?
those my interactions with Paul.
To talk about Paul Sykes, because, you know, listen, I think I've got about 22 books or something now. Paul Sykes was the first, and if I don't get shot or struck by lightning or piano, I'm going to do 100 books the next 25 years. But Paul Sykes was what got me into it. So I will always have this kind of affinity with Wakefield, if you like. I never ever get sick. I never get sick of talking about Paul Sykes. You know, I'll often the only woman I'm allowed to call my wife is Kath. You know, I'll often say, "Oh, I love you, Kath," or I'll walk about and say, "What are these lights doing on Kath?" And you know, I'm just I've been obsessed with him. And Vaughan Sybil's receptionist about 3 years ago said to me, he's obsessed with Paul Sykes. All I hear him talking about is Paul Sykes this, Paul Sykes that. And, you know, it just really takes over you to the point where you're like, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you almost like mirror in him all the time. And because, you know, you're so obsessed with him, you know, you start talking like him and you're doing mannerisms like him.
Do you know, one of the things I've done is in the early days was when I was digging about, I went to Wakefield Library about 6 years ago, and I said, have you got anything on Paul Sykes? And I couldn't believe it. They brought this massive file out, and I was just like, thank you. Just sat all day reading about about Paul Sykes in the papers in 1985, or when his Sweet Agony come out in 1990, or he was the celebrity in the town. And the Wakefield Express would, you know, it was a lot of people in Wakefield would say it's the Paul Sykes paper, because every other week when they had nothing, Paul Sykes has been up to something, so we'll just stick him in. And often a lot of people would write in saying, we're sick of reading about Paul Sykes. This guy, you know, he doesn't bring any kind of goodness to our city. But then there's the people who did like him and who did sit down, and they bought him a Greg's sausage roll and a cup of tea. And, you know, one thing with Paul, whether it was a man, woman or child, he'd all call them flower, and
Right.
and it's, you know, and then people who sat down with him, he kind of, he wasn't scary, if you like, to them. Yes, he was this scary monster, but when you decided you're actually going to give him 5-10 minutes or going to give him £1, then, you know, and a lot of people will talk about that one time when we met Paul Sykes, or when we met him in Wakefield bus station. I don't know, just got some. Who is playing Paul as confidential? It's hasn't been announced yet. Did you sense his ghost at one time? I'm going to tell you a story about this. Now, people can think what they want about this, right? I didn't put it in my book.
I heard this one. Are you talking to, was it the guy who sounds like Peter Kay? You had a podcast with him, didn't you?
Yeah.
I think you might
now,
have told him.
Now, listen.
This is a good story.
Paul Sykes' sister and niece came to stay at my house about 2015, about 6 years ago. And about a week after, now I don't have any boxing bells in my house, and I had ding ding, and things happened, like my bin, like a few times the lid would just get chucked off. And Kay would often say, "Is our Paul's poltergeist still living with you?" And but sometimes when I would type, like one chapter, Robert Ramsden's, who owned the Lupset shop, his chapter went mental. Do you know, like poltergeist? Do you know when they type it and all keys are going? And honestly, I really had bad spirits, and I had to get my house cleansed.
Blessed or cleansed.
Yeah, had to get the people to come in with candles and bless every room. And so many things happened. And then once I get it cleansed, nothing ever happened to this day. Unbelievable. And I never ever put that in the book because it was my first book. And if you were going to read a book and an author starts talking about ghosts, you'd think,
I understand that.
but that's the actual truth. And there was a few other things I could name, and they were all Paul Sykes related. Yeah, you know. So I don't know whether the spirit of, I mean, Kay, she went to what are them things called where you go on like a ghost talk?
Or like a seance or something, or not a seance. And it's like a spiritual reading, isn't it?
She paid something like 15 quid.
Yeah.
And anyway, the woman or the bloke, or I think it was a woman, said, "I've got the spirit here. It's your dad. I've got dogs with me." So it was Walter. And then she said, "This spirit is coming and it's really powerful and he's making me want to drink this pint." And then he said, he wants me to pass these messages on, but they were all derogatory swear words.
Yeah.
And she said, "I can't tell you." And what she done, she'd give her a £15 back. And she was really upset and shaken.
Wow.
And Kay said, "That was my brother still abusing me to death as he did in life."
Wow. Nuts.
I was told that Paul got tinned off. Charles, you keep saying that, David Corbett. Great story. I might even put it in the next book. But yeah, any other questions before I go, guys? Was there anything you want to say, Dave? Chris, sorry.
I'm good, mate. I appreciate you having me on. It's been great.
No, I've always got time for Wakefield folk, and as I said, next year I'm going to be there a lot. And you know,
my missus wants to see Yorkshire anyway, so I've got to get her over there at some point. She's never been there, so it'd be nice to meet up with you and go out for a meal. She doesn't know what she's
missing. Wakefield, yeah, it's one of my favourite places in the world now. And you know, not everyone in the city of Wakefield has wanted me to come along and wake the ghost up. I mean, I first heard of Paul Sykes 2012, so he'd been dead 5 years, and I started doing things about 2015. And of course, I've been met with a lot of trolls and a lot of people saying, "Leave it be," you know, just leave it. And you know, I've met the people, "Oh yeah, I love it," and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. Listen, he's very much part of Wakefield's social history, mythology.
Yes.
What's the word? What's the word? You know what I mean, don't you?
I do.
Mythology.
Mythological. Mythology.
Folklore, and you know,
Definitely
like when Lee
folklore,
died in '91 for Teesside, it was an end of an era. And
like I say, who knows
you know,
what's gonna, you know, come up once the movie's been out, it's been premiered, you know.
I tell you what, one saying, one of the Wakefield police officers said to us, he didn't have to give us some overtime.
I bet.
I bet. He was just, you know, he was just.
So basically, Paul Sykes was putting meals on the table for the police officers and the prison wardens.
He bought their house. He bought their house. And, you know, I mean, one guy who I spoke knew him in his prime. And he knew him when the police would argue and say, "I went to Sykes, left your turn this time." And, you know, no one wanted to go and arrest him. And then people, when he was that old man, talking to the birds in the street, and, you know, the only things he would do then was pissing in the street or pissing on the Bob the Builder in the bus station.
Yeah.
But he kept them busy. And the city of Wakefield will never ever forget the name of Paul Sykes in a hurry.
No, definitely not.
Hang on. Who does that additional footage actually? It belongs to Yorkshire Television, mate. And they're either based in, I've checked, they've got one in Leeds and one in York. So yeah, that's what probably the next thing is. It's probably going to take for so it's not the film, but the documentary, because the plan is the film is going to come out at the same time as the documentary, very much at the same time as the Lenny McLean. And that's how they're going to do it. They're going to kind of bounce. And I personally think there'll be other people who come and do things on Sykes, and I hope they do. You know, I definitely don't see it ending there somehow.
Yeah.
Right, absolute pleasure speaking to you, Chris.
You too, mate. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in. Please don't forget to click and subscribe. God bless. Thanks for your time, Chris.
Cheers, mate. All the best.
Bye.